How many of you enjoy a film? Hands up. I enjoy a film too. I'm sure if I asked you all, I would get lots of different answers because we don't all like the same kind of films. And I like all different kinds of films, but I would have to say that I really quite like superhero films. Now, when I say superheroes, I don't mean the likes of Batman and Superman and all that kind of thing. No, I quite like the Avengers Assemble type of thing, when you've got all these different superheroes and they all work together. That's the kind of films I quite like. Today, we're going to be talking about a superhero of the Bible, and his name is Elijah. He's the one who takes on kings and queens right from the very beginning, and he kills false prophets. And this is the man who stood up to King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And when they didn't listen to him, he's the man who called down a drought on their land. Now, this isn't like a drought that we get here. You know how sometimes you hear it in the news, oh, the reservoirs are starting to kind of get a wee bit low. Hosepipe bans are coming into place, start to try and conserve water. These things last maybe a few weeks, or maybe even into a couple of months. But this drought lasted for 3 years. 3 years. And during that time, Elijah lived very quietly and took himself off to the wilderness. And there, when he was in the wilderness, he was fed food by ravens that were sent from God. Elijah is the prophet who, during this terrible drought, befriends a starving widow and miraculously produces a jar of flour that never runs out. So that means that both him and the widow's family never go hungry during the drought. This is the man who, when the widow's son takes ill and dies, brings him back to life. As we meet Elijah this morning, we need to be aware that he has just had one of his greatest victories. He had challenged the prophets of Baal to find out which God was real. Baal at that time was worshipped by many, many people. And there were idols made of precious metals built so people had something to focus on and to worship. And Baal is often portrayed with a human body and the head of a bull. Anyway, the challenge was set down to see whose God was real. Altars with sacrifices on top were built by both sides. Elijah was so confident that he even doused all his altar and sacrifice in water till it was soaking wet. And so it began. For hours, 450 prophets of Baal danced and prayed. They sang and prayed. And eventually, they whined and prayed. And nothing. Not a spark. Then it was Elijah's turn. He got down on his knees and said quite a short prayer. And next thing, boom, his fire was lit and the altar and sacrifice destroyed. No question then of whose God was real. Elijah won and lived. The prophets of Baal lost and were killed. And if this had been a film, this is the point where Elijah would have been the hero and walked away victorious into the sunset. But it's not a film. I'm sure Elijah was feeling really pretty good because the victory was his. God has been avenged. And life makes sense. He had done everything he was supposed to do. Then it happens. Jezebel sends him a message that she is going to kill him. Wait a minute. This is not what was supposed to happen. What was supposed to happen was that the nation was supposed to turn back to God and the queen would be overthrown. How disappointed and scared must he have felt in that moment? Here's a question for you. Have you ever been disappointed by God? Look at Elijah. He did everything right, and still things went wrong. So if it can happen to him, it can happen to us too. Now, if you had been Elijah, what would you have done in that moment? Probably exactly the same as he did do. He ran as fast and as far away as he could, away down to the south of the country, because what had happened was in the north. So he ran all the way down right to the south of the country with his servant behind him. But then he leaves his servant and he goes on even further into the wilderness until he can go no further. He's exhausted. He runs for 40 days and 40 nights. 40. That's a number that's important in the Bible. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights in the flood. The Israelites were enslaved in Egypt for 40 decades. Moses was in Mount Sinai for 40 days. The Israelites wandered the desert for 40 years. And of course, Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days. Isn't it interesting to think that even the greatest heroes of faith have had 40-day experiences of fear, loneliness, thirst, and hunger? Elijah runs for 40 days, and the interesting thing is he runs to Mount Horeb. He is going back in history, going back in time, tracing the steps of Moses. And isn't that what we do? When things aren't great, we often think of our past, to the good old days when things were wonderful. We think of our Mount Horeb. I can imagine that Elijah is going through a whole gambit of emotions as he travels through the desert. He's already felt the pride and joy of a job done to the best of his ability, and the euphoria of proving that God is real. And now he's frightened for his life, and then there's confusion, wondering where he went wrong, and of course, the exhaustion he's suffering that comes with running in the desert for 40 days. He's at the stage of wanting to end it all, as we hear him say in verse 4, "I've had enough, Lord. Take my life." He just wants to die. This great man. It's all got too much for him. And no wonder. Think about it. Elijah has lived his life for God, doing everything physically, mentally, and emotionally all the time, giving his all of the time. The world has not been a friendly place for him, and life has not been easy. No wonder he's had enough. He's done. He's exhausted. Life and the world have become a bit overwhelming. And maybe you know how that feels. It's hard to live in the world right now. It's hard to wake up in the morning and listen to the news because the world seems to have gone mad. The problems facing us, both nationally and globally, feel bigger than we could ever fix. I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel pretty helpless, and it would be easy to become really overwhelmed. And even closer to home, life can be so rich and rewarding, but it too can sometimes be a wee bit overwhelming. Family life isn't always easy, especially bringing up children these days. And I don't want to frighten these young people that have got lovely wee babies in the congregation this morning, but it never is easy when you're bringing up children. It's not easy feeling ourselves getting older, watching our parents age, and it's not easy to live through illness or deep grief. Wherever we are as a nation, a community, or a family, We all know what those days feel like when the alarm goes off and all we want to do is just pull the covers up and stay cocooned in our beds. And that's where we find Elijah this morning, asleep in the wilderness, under a scrubby wee bush with a rock for a pillow. Maybe we should just lie down with him and wait for God to speak. And when God does speak, it's through an angel he's sent, and he's told to get up and eat. And when Elijah opens his eyes, there's a wee loaf of bread and a jar of fresh water. In the desert, in the middle of nowhere, God provides food and water. Once he has eaten and drank, Elijah falls back asleep. So exhausted is he. Later, the angel returns and encourages Elijah to eat and drink again. Because as we read in verse 7, the angel says, the journey is too much for you. The angel knows, God knows, that life is hard, that the way can be too much. My husband and I visited Egypt quite a long time ago now, and we went to Mount Horeb, or Mount Sinai. Well, we didn't actually get to Mount Sinai, but we were quite close to it. And when we went, we were taken in a nice air-conditioned coach with plenty of ice-cold water in hand. And I can tell you, the desert, I mean, I always think of a desert being sand and dunes and all the rest of it, but it's not. It's not just sand. There's sand, there's stones and boulders and rocks all over the place. And then it becomes mountainous, but it doesn't become mountainous gradually. It just seems to, you go from flat to mountains, just like that. And the mountains in Mount Sinai are made of smooth granite rock and volcanic rock. So they're not easy to climb. And in the mountain area, there's not many roads. There's one wee kind of gully that you can go up. We went to a monastery, and it's just one road there and one road out. But after that, there's nothing. You're on the mountains and you're having to climb. And I, for one, would not have liked to try and even walk that way, let alone run, wearing just sandals and fearing for my life, and in the scorching heat, because it is scorching heat in there. But anyway, you'll notice when the angel speaks to Elijah, there's no judgment, because Elijah is broken. Just gentle encouragement, some food and some water. And it's enough to enable Elijah to reach Mount Horeb and into the safety of a cave. And that's when the fun really begins. God asks why he's in the cave. And Elijah does not waste any time telling God all his woes. So when God tells him to go outside, Elijah thinks, this is it, the big reveal. Here it comes. This is just what I need. So a huge wind comes along, maybe like a hurricane or a tornado. But as we read, God wasn't in the wind. Then a massive earthquake shakes everything. But God wasn't in the earthquake. Then fire burns all around the mountain and outside the cave as well. But God wasn't in the fire. And then there was nothing. Just silence. Sheer silence. How long did that silence last, I wonder? Silence is a funny thing. We often try to fill it with noise. The TV, the radio, chatting, anything. Why do we do that? When sometimes silence is what we need. God speaks once more to Elijah and tells him to go back to the world and the wonderful things waiting for him and for what he has to do. Now, I wonder where you are in your journey right now. Maybe you are experiencing your Mount Horeb for the first time, and God is doing amazing things in your life. Maybe you're in a wrestling match with God. Or maybe you've been faithful but have been disappointed and you're experiencing your 40 days. Where is God? God is here. God is in all your experiences, always. What I've learned through life is that you can't go back. You can remember the past and learn from it, but you can't go back. And also, we live by faith. God's mercy is new each and every morning. Our job is to trust in his faithfulness and be willing to listen for God's gentle whisper. The world is changing, my friends, and God is moving in fresh and wonderful new ways as the Holy Spirit empowers and guides us to love one another. So may we all be encouraged that God still speaks, even in the silence, and he has an exciting future for all of us. Amen.